our forum, and this involves the 6 people running for commissioner. There are 4 open seats to be elected April 4th. And we are going to start, as we did with the mayoral candidates, with opening statements. The commissioner candidates have 2 minutes to make an opening remark. Last shot, if you want to ask a question or a specific commissioner-related question, we have cards in the back. Jessica McKinnon has them. We'd welcome your questions, and we'll get underway. So the order of speaking was set by a drawing, and so we are going to, and our candidates will speak from where they are, not come down. And so we are going to start with Michelle Mellon-Rogovin.
Good evening. Thanks for coming tonight. My name is Michelle Mellon-Rogovin, and I fell in love with Forest Park long before I ever set foot on a street in the village. I was a volunteer for the Historical Society, where I worked on a tour guide for one of our village cemeteries. And I loved the village's history. Not long after that, I moved here in 1994, married my husband, and got involved with village life, my neighborhood, and many of the fabulous organizations, nonprofits, and civic organizations like the Historical Society of Forest Park, 209 Scholarship. I started a cat rescue for stray cats. I'm involved in the Care About the PTO, many organizations in Forest Park. What you may not know about me is I work at Northwestern University's Feinberg School of Medicine. And by day, I write grants with scientists, and I help them, so I fundraise, and I help them explain their complicated science, their complex science, to people like you and me to help them fund their research. I help build collaborations, and I help them explain their work so that they can get new and increased opportunities for funding from new sources, which is really important. Our village has such vibrant and wonderful organizations, an incredible combination of really talented and unique individuals, and a responsive village government. And what this position is going to allow me to do is to combine the skills and knowledge that I have and the opportunities and work that I've done as a volunteer and create greater impact for the village. When I raised $30 million during the pandemic for my scientists, I'd like to take those skills and that knowledge along with my passion to create new opportunities for the village as a commissioner in Forest Park. Thank you very much.
Next is Ryan Nero.
Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out. I appreciate it. We did this 4 years ago, and the turnout tonight, even with a little bit of a mass exodus, is much better. So testament to you all for being engaged with local politics. So once again, thank you all for coming out this evening. Yes, as Dan mentioned, my name is Ryan Nero. I am currently your Commissioner of Streets and Public Improvement. And so what does that mean? So when it comes to snow removal, leaf pickup, tree trimming, trash removal, flower planting, grass cutting, and many more services that we've grown to appreciate in town, I'm your guy. So I'm a 20-year resident here in the village of Forest Park. I live here with my wife Tracy in the back for over 16 years, and my son Rocco, who is going to be a freshman at Fenwick. And I couldn't believe it when I asked him to come here tonight, and I was surprised that he would much rather play basketball with his friends than be here at the candidate forum. So prior to serving as commissioner here in town, I was the chairman of traffic and safety. I did that about 5 years ago, and then also served on the ad hoc Altenheim committee, which I'm sure there'll be a question about at some point this evening. So as a candidate 4 years ago, as a new candidate 4 years ago, we got posed the question, why do you want to do this? And here, after 4 years being Streets and Public Improvement Commissioner, it's still a relevant question. Why do you want to continue to do this? And so my answer, I think, is simple. I think if you have the education, the passion, the enthusiasm, leadership skills, and most importantly, you generally want to make a difference. Most importantly, you generally want to make a difference. Forest Park has realized measurable changes for the good during my term, and there is always more to do. So I want to continue to be an influencer for that positive change. I want to continue to be your commissioner. I want to work with the chamber, the businesses, and the residents. I want to ensure that Forest Park continues to be a great place to live, work, play, and by focusing on upgrading our infrastructure, driving public health and safety initiatives, and supporting our local businesses, I believe with your continued support, we can do just that. Thank you.
Joe Landgraf.
Good evening. Thanks for coming out. I believe tonight is probably the most important part of this process. It's you folks gathering today. This is democracy in action, and I'm proud to be here. It's an inspiration. Landgraf, yes, thanks, Dan. My name is Landgraf, Joe Landgraf. Hard to pronounce, I know. It's long too. Landgraf. 10 years ago, I was choosing a place to live. I chose Forest Park. Why? Well, you know the obvious reasons, right? Ideal location. Rory said 20 minutes to each airport. I do it in 15. You have Madison Street, the L. We know it's great. After living here for some time, I realized it was the people that made it home. Forest Park's residence is its greatest asset, and we are in the room tonight. A little about myself. I'm a father of a preschooler. I'm a family man. A little bit about my background. Well, I go way back, but we won't go too far back today. I have a graduate degree in government policy. I was a school teacher in a foreign country, not in America. I have extensive international business experience, traveled the world, been to I don't know how many countries. I'm now a local real estate broker, and I can bring that knowledge to Forest Park. I believe a lot of the challenges and questions we face today are related to real estate. I think we need an expert in real estate to help do this job for us.
Thanks. Ryan Russ.
Oh, do I have 2 minutes, 1 second, 10 seconds?
1 second, sure.
10 seconds. Goals. I'm here to help us achieve our goals. What are our goals? Safety, belonging, and progress. Thank you very much.
Ryan Russ.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ryan Russ. Thank you for coming out to the place where I had my second grade gym show in 1986, I believe it was, or 85. So I'm a lifelong resident of Forest Park. I bleed Forest Park. That's what I'm about. It's in me. The reason I'm running for commissioner is because when I was younger, there was never someone that looked like me up here doing this. So 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to run against 8 other people. So I decided to do it again and hope that my odds were a little better, and that seems to have worked out for me. So That has gotten better, but I'm a people person. I'm the guy that likes to say hi to everybody. I might not know you, but I want to get to know you. Again, I'm from Forest Park, and the reason I'm here is because I just want to contribute in any way I can. Whether I've served on the Zoning and Planning Commission, I've served on the Citizens Advisory Council. I used to work at the Park District. I know this town inside and out, good, bad, and indifferent. I want to make it the place where my kids want to bring their kids back to. Just like I didn't have a choice in 1984 when my mom moved above Butler Rug Company on Madison Street, and I haven't looked back. Moved next to the Novaks, lived there. My circle has grown, so I just want to keep that circle growing, and I want to make sure that Forest Park is the great place it always has been and continue to be. Thank you.
Maria Maxim.
Good evening. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm so excited that there are so many residents out to hear all of us candidates speak. My name is Maria Maxam. I'm currently serving as the Commissioner of Public Health and Safety, which is a little bit of a misnomer because it really is building, planning, and zoning. So that's sort of the area that I kind of oversee right now. My husband, Jason, who's in the back, and we moved to Forest Park a little over 20 years ago. We bought a real small one-story home and thought we'd only be here for a few years, and then we just really fell in love with the town. We built a second story on our house, and now we have a small two-story house that we've been in for over 20 years, and we love it here. We're raising our family here. We have 3 children, and all 3 of them have attended or are currently attending District 91 and District 209 public schools. And for years, I have been involved in working hard to improve District 209 public high schools, not just for my kids, but for all the thousands of kids in Proviso Township that don't have other options. Prior to being appointed to this position as a commissioner in July 2021, I worked for the Forest Park Review as the editor, and that gave me a chance to really learn about the nuances that go into running Forest Park and what Forest Park means and is. And I developed a lot of great relationships with village staff, department heads, and residents, and I've carried those through into my term as commissioner. I've held 2 town halls already with my department on important issues, and I will continue to do that. I really believe in resident engagement, and I love hosting town hall meetings. I'm also working really hard on mental health initiatives right now, partnering with Proviso Township Mental Health Commission, and bringing back the Public Health Board as a commission underneath the village so that we can make sure that all those important health and mental health issues are being addressed. Thank you.
Jessica Vogt.
Thank you. I want to thank the Review and the Chamber for hosting tonight and thank everyone for coming out. My name is Jessica Vogt. I was elected in 2019 to the Village Council, and I currently am serving as Commissioner of Public Property. I'm running for re-election because I believe transparency, respectful responsiveness, and community engagement are vital to the health and success of Forest Park. A government that embraces these ideals enacts stronger, more inclusive policies. And I've supported that for the last 4 years, and I remain committed to those ideals. Every election, we talk about issues facing the village, from village finances and generating revenue to pension obligations and flooding and infrastructure updates and public safety. But without transparency, we fail to effectively meet any of those challenges. Transparency is sharing information and being open and honest about procedure. It ensures the proper allocation of resources and equal opportunities in public and private sector, and it fairly focuses public policy priorities. So for me, serving Forest Park is about the long term. It's not about my term. By working together in an open and honest way, we all can enact policies that are in the best interest of Forest Park for not just now, but for the future. And I just want to say that it's wonderful to have so many options and so many candidates, more so than seats. And I thank all my friends up here for giving their time to run and their commitment to the village, and I wish you all the best.
Okay, thanks to all of you. We are going to get started. I am asking you to keep your answers quick, short, to the point. Everyone does not have to answer every question. Some of the questions are actually for specific people. First question is an interesting one. Forest Park, every town. Candidates emphasize how long they've lived here. A few of you have mentioned you've been around a long time. But rarely do candidates talk about how to engage new movers, especially renters. Forest Park has a lot of renters. Why don't we start on the left and go down? How would you work to accomplish that?
I grew up as that kid. My parents rented until I was 18 years old, and they finally purchased a house. So it's by our park districts, by our school districts, our community. That's what keeps that way, is everybody that's out here. That's what it is.
Joe?
As a real estate professional, I work with a lot of renters. They're not always looking in Forest Park first, but by the time I'm done with them, they're moving here. It's a great community, it's an easy sell. That's why I'm here tonight. Thank you.
As far as engaging the rental community, let's be honest, in the Village of Forest Park, we have a lot of renters. And so it's a big part of our community. And some of the things that we could do is really celebrate the assets that we have, right? Our Main Street community, Roosevelt Road, Harlem Avenue, which has seen a lot of improvements over the years. Working with the Chamber like we have been, beautifying Madison Street and making Forest Park the best place it could possibly be. It helps to get and attract more people to the Village of Forest Park, and it helps to get our renters out and more engaged into the community.
Michelle?
The village has access to data, and there are other data sources to identify renters versus homeowners. I would start by, I've talked to renters when I've been out, and I'd want a survey, like a community survey. I'd also use online places that maybe renters go to engage people to participate in a very simple, maybe Google survey to say, you know, how would you like to engage more with the village? The library would also be a good source. Ask questions, find out more about how to engage renters, and then follow up and provide on those top 3 answers.
Jessica?
I would agree with Michelle that data and outreach would be very helpful to pursue them in a steady fashion. I also think that Forest Park, we're all engaging each other. I mean, it's interesting, just being out and about and talking to people. I've met renters who eventually ended up buying here. I have some very close friends who it was going to be temporary, and then you start seeing them at the same, you know, pizza place or the same, you know, coffee shop, and you become more engaged. And I remember they had just moved into their apartment, and it was right around the time we were running 4 years ago, and I said, well, you should come out to this, you know, meet and greet. And they were really excited to be engaged. So I feel like we all do that, all of you do that. Forest Park is a very welcoming community, and I think just celebrating that and making sure that we're reaching out to everybody and continuing that warmth that we all offer.
Maria?
I think that's a really great question. There is a large percentage of renters in town, and there's a really big group of engaged residents who show up for everything. And I recognize so many people here, and it's great that the same people, you know, show up and are engaged and volunteer, but I do think we need to do a better job reaching out to people who rent, because there is such a large population of them. And I know on my own block, when I've been, going canvassing now door to door, I've had really great discussions with the people, sometimes it's harder to get people to come to the door. But when they do, they're really active and interested and they want to be involved. And I think it should be a goal that we have as a village to find ways to reach out to sort of a broader base of our population so we can have as much input as possible.
We're going to repeat some questions from the first part of the evening. And let's do this one to start with a show of hands. How many of you would actively support a referendum on home rule with the idea that you would like to see home rule happen? Jessica?
I mean, I support a referendum if the people want to.
Would you like to see home rule happen in Forest Park?
I would like to see an engaged conversation about it. I think a lot of times it tends to frighten folks when we just hear that it's going to raise your property taxes, but it does expand the capability of generating revenue in more creative ways than having to do that. A friend of mine had made an analogy about how it's like you're living in your own house and you can make your own rules, or you're living in someone else's house and you have to live by their rules. So there is something to be said for exploring it further and truly understanding what the pros and cons of it are.
Michelle?
I would welcome the opportunity for people to weigh in, like Jessica said. There's several reasons where I would be very, very hesitant to adopt home rule.
Because?
Because I believe it would undermine equity and equity and fairness, and it would overturn the ability for people with fixed and limited incomes to live in Forest Park. We're in a donut of relative affluence compared to the communities that we live around, and I think it would cause turmoil in terms of.
Anyone else?
That's one reason.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So home rule really it gets a bad rub because it's associated with raising your property taxes. Well, guess what? I'm a resident here in town. I don't want my property taxes going up either. But what it does afford us, and maybe you heard a little bit during the mayoral forum, is that it provides opportunities for revenue. And it also provides an opportunity to look at sources to help support our pension funds that are well underfunded. So there's some really good stuff there by going home rule for a small community like Forest Park.
Joe?
It's a great question. I'm willing to look at it. I haven't made up my mind yet. It would allow us to increase autonomy, perhaps more tailored solutions like zoning changes, financial engineering like issuing bonds, all important things for our village. However, the word raising taxes, or a couple words, raising taxes, came off the lips of many of my friends here, and none of us are in support of that. We all know that. Especially in these inflationary times, we don't have extra money. So I'm willing to look at it, willing to discuss it with you folks, and determine our future. Thank you.
Right.
At the end of the day, the residents would have to decide that. So that's part of this process. I think that's the greatest part about being a commissioner and having the resources to have the smarter people in the room, have the conversation, so then as a village council we can make the decision, but at the end of the day, the residents would have to bring that to the table front and foremost. So that would have to happen first, and then the discussion is the discussion.
So Maria, I'm sorry. Please, I'm sorry.
I agree with a lot of what the other candidates here have said. I think, home rule does have a kind of bad reputation sometimes because trust is always at the center of the debate. Do we trust our elected officials enough to give them more power in terms of looking at, taxes, for example? But it also doesn't always have to mean increased property taxes, which is, I think, what everybody always associates with home rule. That the fear is, and it could happen, that property taxes would go up. But there's also the opportunity to shift the burden away from residents into special use taxes, transfer taxes, which I'm not saying I necessarily support, but there are other options out there that don't necessarily mean a bigger tax burden on the residents. So I think it's something that would be a good option for Forest Park, which is very limited in terms of different revenue streams that we have available to us.
If you are elected or re-elected as a commissioner, what role, if any, does the village have in trying to collaborate, support the two public school districts that serve Forest Park Elementary and High School? Or is it just a separate entity and? Okay.
It is a separate taxing entity, obviously, but I don't think we can separate it from our responsibility as residents, and especially we can't separate it from our responsibility as elected or appointed officials. When we kind of use the excuse and say, you know, oh, well, they're a separate body, we have to let them do what we want, what we're ignoring is the fact that right now, it's a disaster in District 209. And if we're not paying attention, if we're not going to the meetings or at least watching them, we are not only wasting our property tax dollars that are going to the public schools as they should, but we are being complicit in failing thousands of students every single day. And I will not be complicit in that. Thank
The Oak Park River Forest Community Survey had an analysis of key issues in looking at equity and equality in the West Cook region. And when it looked at education and access to educational opportunities, looked at the West Cook region and found that according to the Census Bureau and American Community Survey, high school students in Forest Park, at least according to this survey, 25% of high school students in Forest Park were living at the poverty line. And so, you know, I myself don't have a high school student, but it is something we all need to be concerned about, the high schools, the school districts, beyond the fact that our tax dollars go to them. These are members of our community. Our kids are members of our community. The schools support them. We support them as members. It is an ethical issue. It is a moral issue. It is a fiscal issue. And we, by our example, need to be witnessing and supporting the improvement of our schools, even though they are a separate body and have separate responsibilities to our students.
Are there other responses? Oh, Jessica?
Sure. I just wanted to reiterate that what Maria and Michelle said, that I do understand the impact our schools have. Whether you have kids in them or not, they affect our property taxes and our property values. And there's a thread in our community that can be disrupted because all of a sudden we have kids leaving Forest Park to go to a different school district. And we lose friends and we lose family members, we lose friends and we lose neighbors. And so it is an important thread in this community, even though they are separate. And it's important that we continue to support our students and demand transparency and accountability from those boards as much as you should demand them from your local government here. And as my role as commissioner to at least try to reach out to our schools and engage them, I have worked with D91. I've invited them to our Arbor Day celebrations. So the kids have come out and they've helped us plant trees, and they've shared their opinions on trees and why they're important, and trying to at least identify ways that we can keep that relationship going, I think is also an important way that we can at least partner with our schools and engage our kids.
Other responses?
Yeah, so sadly, You know, I've had family and friends that have moved out of town, you know, when their kids got old enough to go to high school, or when they had kids going into school, period. And that doesn't make me very proud, to be quite frank with you. I guess I would only ask that the involvement, the engagement that we have here in this room tonight is the same or greater when we're talking about our school districts. Thanks.
District 91 has always been District 91. It's awesome, and I'm a product of it. 209 is obviously a different story, but I think people focus a little too much on the negative. And, you know, there are a lot of Proviso East graduates in this room that, you know, there are Proviso East graduates that have flown to the moon, that are track star, you know, it's endless. I would definitely go with what the other Ryan said about showing up. And, you know, when I was growing up and when you got into 8th grade, fortunately, we didn't move. We stayed, but kids went to different high schools, the St. Joe's, the Fenwicks, wherever you went, but we all stayed together. So I know that sense of neighborhood can continue, you know, but obviously our elementary schools are priority. That's what brings people here. And our high school, we have to support that as elected officials, 100%.
Joe?
As a father of a preschooler, I absolutely believe this is an important question. As a lifelong student myself, and as a former educator, I believe education is the foundation of every human being. However, unfortunately, as a commissioner, this is out of my purview. And at this time, I don't have a solution for you. Thank you.
So, a couple of questions from the audience. Is there a plan that Forest Park could ever get ahead of the sewer problems, the flooding problems? Been talked about forever.
Sure, I'll take a stab.
Yeah.
All right, go easy. So you know, we have taken some great strides. You know, and I was going to talk a little bit about it. If you get a chance or an opportunity as you're leaving tonight, there's some literature over by the table that talks about some tremendous accomplishments we've made over the last 4 years, specifically with sewer and stormwater separation, which directly affects flooding in the Village Forest Park. Bigger issue, which I was saving for my close, but over the last 4 years, the flood grant program that we had in Forest Park 4 years ago was $10,000. I have pushed that year over year, and it's up to $45,000 this year, which provides you, the residents of Forest Park, an opportunity to install flood control programs or systems into your home. And it's fully funded, and it was every grant was made available to the full amount of $45,000 this year. So that was fantastic.
Flooding, sewers.
I live in Forest Park, so I am well aware of having water in my basement. I think it's probably happened to all of us at some point. And Ryan's correct, the village consistently is working on the infrastructure upgrades, sewer separations, and because of that sewer tax, we were able to give a larger grant, which is fantastic. I would also say that I have pushed really hard on green infrastructure and sustainability issues, and that you can't work individually. We have to work on multiple things at one time. You want to avoid like the silo approach. So working to better care for and protect our trees, they help to mitigate, you know, stormwater overflow. Adopting green infrastructure projects like our green alleys. We unfortunately didn't get to do a green paver lot in front of the municipal complex this past year, but projects like that retain tens of thousands of gallons of stormwater and slowly release it back into the ground. So that's alleviating that burden on our sewers, which helps keep a little bit of that water out of our basements. So by working on all of these things together, we can help to alleviate the problem. That's all I have.
Ryan spoke very well about what's in place. The flood prevention program, I think, is fantastic. When we first moved into our house, 20 years ago, the real estate form said this house has never flooded, and lo and behold, all our boxes in the basement got destroyed because, of course, it flooded. So we immediately put in a sump pump and a backflow valve. At the time, if that program existed, I didn't know about it, so we didn't get to take advantage of it. But I'm glad that it's out there for residents. And I do think green infrastructure is a really important way also to alleviate environmental concerns. And I would really like to see the village put together a very solid sustainability plan. Part of that could be in relation to the C4 initiative that we're involved in, but just to have a plan, annual, 3-year, 5-year, whatever it is, so that we have sort of benchmarks to make sure that we're reaching different goals when we need to.
Joe?
It's an unfortunate problem in Forest Park. I live here as well, obviously. I'm just standing before you. We all have the dread of walking to our basement one morning and there's 2 inches of water, right? What do you do? Selling real estate in Forest Park, that's only my only concern when I sell a home is there water in the basement, or had water in the basement. Ryan has talked extensively about this. I believe the village is doing a good job of improving and continuing to find solutions to upgrade our infrastructure. I will support them to continue to do that. Thank you.
Right.
The village has a pretty good 3-year plan that they've just put into place. They're opening streets, they're changing water mains, they're doing what they have to do. It is, I don't know if anyone here has ever been to a Metropolitan Water Reclamation District meeting, but that process is long, super deep tunnel talk and all of that stuff, 2037. So the steps that we're taking in the village right now, the green initiatives and, the small things work. 20 years ago, they told us to take our downspouts out of the ground and, start letting it pour into the yard. And now we're figuring that, we need to make little rain gardens in the yard to soak up that water. So just the steps that we're taking as a village are definite improvements. There'll never be a stop to flooding. As everyone says, water does what water does. So,
as from a municipal point of view, can you offer a definition of equity? Brian, you're going?
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. So it's probably a buzzword when we talk about equity and fairness and diversity. I would say look at your elected officials, look at our current board, look at our boards and commissions in the village of Forest Park. Should I go out on a limb and say, a middle-aged white guy, we got a senior citizen, 2 women, and a black mayor? I think we're doing okay. Certainly Forest Park can refuel and do better, but I think we're making the right strides. At the end of the day, it's about putting the right people in the right position. And what I mean it's okay is because we look at things differently, and that's a good thing. The way I look at things through my eyes, with the way that I was raised, where I went to school, and my life experiences are different than Jessica's and Maria's. And different than Joe's, and they're certainly different than the mayor's, but at the same time, it provides perspective. It provides progress. It provides different ways of solving problems for all of us coming together for a common cause, the good of Forest Park, and it's worked.
Michelle?
Yeah, I found this challenging because of, the perspective that I offer is just one perspective. I think there's obviously processes and representation and systemic things that we want to have happen in society and in our communities that represent equity and inclusion. But then there are ongoing representations and experiences of equity and inclusion that we feel are important to truly have equity, and that's with racial, societal, every type of equity we think of, engagement, and an ongoing commitment and participation of every member of our society in a meaningful way that is defined by the community. So that is not a substantial definition, but that is what I can come up with that means something to me as far as equity.
So this was one of the questions that, or similar to one of the questions that the review had posed to us all to put into writing, and I probably was the hardest question for me to answer. And I came to the conclusion that I don't think I, by myself, can come up with a really strong definition of what equity means. I see things through the lens that I've seen things through. Just like I wouldn't want, like a man to speak for me as a woman, I would never try to speak for somebody else, that I don't represent. And so what I would really like to see is for us to revive our diversity commission, but in a very meaningful way, and to do it with the help of a diversity, equity, inclusion expert who could tell us, here's where you are missing, here's where people are missing out on resources and opportunities that they need. Here's where, you are not reaching out to the right people that you want to pull in, to engage. I don't know, I know that I don't have the answers to do that or the ability to do that, and I would want to bring in an expert who could provide that service for us. So then we could put together the Diversity Commission again, give it more, kind of task them with more ability, not ability, but to have more input into decision-making that we do as a village. And I think it's going to have to be something that we take very seriously, and it is a priority to me.
I absolutely believe racial equity should be a priority in municipal government. Equitable access to resources and services is integral to our society. As a real estate broker, I'm familiar with the importance of affordable housing on equitable outcomes for everyone. As a member of the Citizen Police Academy, I'm learning how equitable policing practice can develop community relationships, improve outcomes for law enforcement and our citizens. I believe removing economic barriers like minority-owned cannabis dispensaries can create equal outcomes for everyone. There are a myriad of solutions we can find, and not just talk about it, but actually find solutions. And that's what I'm looking to do. Thank you.
It sounds like everybody has, I hope, the beginnings of the right idea. A lot of it is about educating ourselves and listening and beginning this journey. I think we could all agree that racial equity in government is the consistent, fair, and impartial treatment of all individuals, and we can start the discussion of where we're failing and who we need to bring into the conversation. It's the intentional practice of creating or adjusting policies and processes to eliminate disparities and encourage inclusive engagement and representation. But the village, I think, should create, we need to have a strategic planning session from the get-go, but in that strategic plan, I think we should create a racial equity action plan, and that has to have inclusive engagement and diverse representation from people in the village. And I think that this is a good way to start to apply that equity lens to all policy decisions that happen in the village. And to further that effort of hopefully engaging folks to start applying for jobs at the village, running for office, so that we start to see our representation and staff looking like the people that we represent.
Diversity and inclusion, to me, is Forest Park. 20 years ago, 40 years ago, this room didn't look the way this room looks today. That's diversity and inclusion. For me, it's treating every single person with respect and dignity. That's first and foremost, whether it's government or not. When we're walking down the street and I see Shannon, I'm smiling and saying, "Hi, Shannon." That's how we do it. So diversity and equity it's broader than just municipal government. It's, for me and my family, it's a way of life. And that's why Forest Park has been what it means to me, is because when I was in 3rd grade, I was the black kid. And I didn't know that I was the black kid because nobody made that a deal. It wasn't like, oh, there's Ryan, the black kid. It was, I'm another kid on Hannah. That's diversity and inclusion, and again, to me, that's Forest Park. And of course, we always have further to go because not everybody is always on the same page.
So Forest Park winds up with 2 cannabis dispensaries throwing off a chunk of money. Are there specific places that money should be earmarked for? Ryan, you talked earlier about underfunded police and fire pensions. You've all talked about infrastructure, or does that just go into the general kitty?
Asked and answered.
That's where you think the money would go?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said, about underfunded pensions, certainly a large portion of the revenue generated, tax revenue generated by the dispensaries is a good place to put the money, and certainly infrastructure. Just to throw some color on that, over the last 4 years, we've done 4,800 linear feet of water main replacements. We've done, 16,000 linear feet of road surfacing, and there's a point here. 1,300 feet of, linear feet of alley reconstruction, green and otherwise. 2,900 linear feet of sewer separation. So what does that mean? What that means, and there's a lot of other stuff that happened, that we were able to do all that. And 75% of the cost of that was paid through TIF and grant money. And so opening up sources of revenue can allow us to do so much more in Forest Park, and that's just one of them.
Don't want to put you on the spot, but ballpark, how underfunded are the police and fire pensions? How big is the hole?
Yeah, I wouldn't be prepared to talk about that today.
that's fine.
Thank you.
Other people have thoughts on where the money should go? Joe?
Yes, the issue of cannabis has come up recently, we're all well aware. Cannabis is a low-hanging fruit. Other communities have it, they'll bring it back to the community. I don't think we should let this slip through our fingers. I'm well aware of the pension challenges we face. I'm a board member of the firefighters' pension. I know what the future looks like, and we have to start getting creative with revenue growth. And this is just one piece of it. So I do believe we could find more, and I will continue to endeavor to do that for you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. Pensions, okay. Okay. Question,
Okay.
what tools does Forest Park have, if any or enough, to have impact on development of affordable and accessible housing? Or is that really very limited? Maria?
I don't know if I'm going to answer that question exactly as you asked it, but I will say that, there are requirements that towns have to have a certain percentage of their housing be affordable. And I don't know the numbers, but I know Forest Park has met and exceeded that. So it doesn't mean we don't have to think about adding more affordable housing, but it's also not, when I worked for the Review and sometimes reported on River Forest stories, they would be struggling to find ways to incentivize, developers to build in affordable housing into what they were creating because there was such a lack of it there. We don't suffer from that lack of it in Forest Park.
Michelle?
One of the things that I would like to do, I've noticed in both reading in social media forums online and in general just driving around and seeing housing, we've had a lot of instability in the last couple of years, a lot of people moving in and out. One of the things that I'd like to do is look at housing mobility and analyzing data sources to see, how many vacant buildings we have, with the sales for the Cook County Treasurer's Office. There's a lot of people that haven't paid their property taxes. And to see if there's opportunities to work with folks like the Cook County Land Bank, et cetera, with some of the places that Jeff Binns-Kelby has been calling Steve Glinke to put a lock on because there are vacant houses in Forest Park. Are there opportunities to create, real housing opportunities for people to become, instead of renters, homeowners? What opportunities are there, but to get, I know the village keeps track of houses that are vacant. Can we convert those folks into, those housing opportunities into real places for people to live and therefore get property taxes? So that's something I'd like to explore.
Okay. Anyone else on affordable housing?
Yes, I'll take a dive at this. This is an issue really for the private sector. Government should be in the business of buying property, selling property. This is something we do with zoning. We make it attractive for private investors to come into town and build affordable housing. This is a piece I'd like to thread through my narrative throughout our conversations in town. What can we do with zoning to make it more attractive for outsiders to come here and build property that can be affordable for all? Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna do one last question and be done in the next 10 minutes or so. And so this is kind of the wrap-up question, and it's broad and specific. If you were re-elected to the commission, what are the 3 things that are most important on your list of priorities? Please go.
I'll go first. I touched on briefly in the beginning. I don't want to be too long-winded here. I know everyone's tired. Safety is number 1, right? If your house is burning down, nothing else matters. You need the firefighters. We should support them and do everything we can to bring revenue into this town. They make sure they have all the tools to do their job. Belonging. I believe all of us deserve a seat at the table and a voice in the community. I want to be your voice. Finally, progress. As I said earlier, development. We have to find creative ways to bring revenue to this town. And I will use every tool that I have, and I will rely on you too. You are my asset. As I stated previously, you are the resource. We will look for all avenues to bring revenue to this town, to make sure we have a viable future and continue to progress. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Our essential services are definitely a priority. I think a few people have mentioned our village hall we've outgrown it. That would be a priority to figure out a game plan for our fire department and our police department and our village hall. People, I'm a people person. I said that at the beginning. That's what it is for me. That's why I'm doing it. If I was elected, I would continue to do that, to engage the residents, to have the conversations. I think that's very important in a village this size, to be able to reach out and say, what is your opinion? And for those people to actually feel like they're sitting at the table because I'm sitting at the table.
So there's, I appreciate that, Ryan, because I think one of the greatest things about our community, and not to sound cliche, it is the people. It's the events that we have, right? Going back to Ribfest and Summerfest, Oktoberfest, Groovin' in the Grove, right? All of these wonderful things. that we, as the residents of Forest Park, get this ability to come out and engage the community, right? That's a big thing. You know, when we talk as, politicians or candidates, I've spent a lot of time talking about infrastructure, and I don't want that to make me sound cold. So I've spent my career, 25 years, in the safety and health arena for a large construction firm. So I have a lot of experience on the construction side, but certainly the safety and health of our residents and visitors to our community is important. If we have, we talk about the business district, downtown business district a lot, right? Madison Street. But it's so important that not only is Madison Street bolstered and thriving, but also Harlem Avenue, right? And also Roosevelt Road, also Des Plaines Avenue, right? Those are the gateways to our community. Think about, in just a short period of time, 4 years, what's been done on Madison Street, the businesses that have come into town, right? Once vacant properties sitting on Harlem Avenue are now thriving businesses in the village of Forest Park. Once businesses in Oak Park are now thriving businesses in Forest Park. That's exciting. And there's a lot of good news happening in the village of Forest Park in terms of development. And I want to have a seat at the table for the next 4 years with your support to be able to move the needle forward. You know, I value fairness and honesty, and I'll wrap this up. I've always given my reasons, albeit sometimes not everybody agrees with them, but I'll always tell you what I think and why I make the decisions that I make. You know, I've worked hard. Trust is a big thing, and you just don't get trust. You have to earn it. And I hope over the last 4 or 5 years, or the extra years serving on committees, that I've earned your trust. And not just for, I don't know, the greater good of some or a few, but for the greater good of Forest Park as we move forward. So, in closing, I just want to say, if this is the close, you know, when you go to the polls April 4th, you know, Ryan Nero is your commissioner. Thank you.
Jessica? Michelle, you're up.
Hi there. My top 3 priorities, you know, so I'm a collaborative and team-oriented person with a growth mindset, and I really decided to run for commissioner because Forest Park is coming out of COVID, but we're still going to have some economic needs, and especially for pensions, as everybody has identified. I'm going to work to identify grants for priority needs, leveraging the unique ecosystem of our village assets, what we all been talking about, nonprofits, our schools and businesses, and the strengths of our village residents as a whole, not in silos, to obtain funding for our essential needs and to provide substantial funding so that the village has the flexibility to identify additional sources of revenue for those pensions and to grow the kinds of things we need to do in the near future and the long term. And I want to provide technical support and help plan for the future and be there to represent our residents and and to chart that course. I want to contribute to community safety. I recognize how, it didn't come up tonight really, but you know, how the CTA and some of those issues with community safety have been an issue. And I have some ideas about how helping our first responders, our police, focus on those core things that they want to focus on and trying to complement some of the things that the village has really been focusing on with mental health and wraparound services. There are pilot programs that have been trying to do this in Philadelphia and other cities called Hub of Hope. And I think if we work with our partners that Mayor Hoskins and our commissioners here have been pulling together and looking at some of those long-term issues, and hopefully we can provide some of those wraparound services and allow our first responders, our police, to focus on their core job and not going to the CTA so much. Those are the kinds of things that I'd like to find funding for to help reduce the stress of our police are facing. And then to focus on, like I said, stability in Forest Park and looking at housing and other core issues that get to the quality of life that we all seek to have and to benefit our schools and the stability of our neighborhoods. Thank you very much, and I thank you for your support.
Jessica.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a big question. I think we've talked about a lot of big topics that require more than 90 seconds or 2-minute answers. But like I said at the beginning, transparency and engagement are key to meeting any of the tasks that lie ahead. And my focus has always been about the long term and not just my term. So one of the 3 or 4 of my key things that I'd like to focus on going forward are holdovers, even from this term. I've wanted to update our comprehensive plan. That's been long overdue. That is a main goal of mine for the next term if I'm reelected. We have to update our village code and zoning, which we voted to in our last budget meeting to fund that. So that's exciting, and that is going to happen. We need to have a strategic planning session. I asked for that 4 years ago. That will be super helpful for the new mayor and council. Whether I'm on it or not, we should all make sure we're knocking on the door asking them to do this, because it helps focus their ideas, and it lets you know what we're thinking of, and we can get your input on what you think is important over the next 3, 4, 5 years. We can set those benchmarks. It helps us work together. There's a lot of spinning plates. So by doing that, it can really help us all work together to get things accomplished. Part of the strategic plan should be an economic development opportunity plan that outlines goals, strategies, policies, and actions to support existing businesses and attract new commercial ventures and promote growth. And part of that plan, that's why I said there's a lot of work to do, includes that racial equity action plan. I haven't gotten into sustainability yet, but that's something where all of these things do work together, and you figure out each step of the way, whatever you're talking about, how equity factors into it, how sustainability factors into it, how we're taking care of our workers and making sure that they're making a living wage and we're accountable to our pensions. I was going to answer the cannabis question. That was us diversifying our resources, and part of that can go to hopefully help alleviate our pension burden. And then by doing all of that, we should be including you every step of the way to get your feedback and to help us work for Forest Park, not just for right now, but for the long term. Thanks.
Those are great ideas, and I'm particularly glad that you mentioned the zoning rewrite that's coming up, because I'm very excited about that. Zoning is actually very, very exciting. In case you didn't know, I've come to have a very deep love for it. It's hard to talk about just 3 things that are, things that I really want to accomplish. I am very, very excited about the economic development that has been happening over the past few years. The economy has always, it's been a struggle for this town for a while, but if you look at Harlem Avenue, there's, multiple new businesses there. Madison Street is just booming with new restaurants that are very, very exciting. And with the addition of cannabis at least one location, we're going to have some revenue coming in that will hopefully be used, among other things, to offset our pension, or start working towards, lowering bringing us closer to meeting our pension obligation. I also believe very, very strongly in resident engagement, and I don't just say that, I've done it. Since I was appointed as a commissioner, I've held 2 town halls, and I want to continue to do that. I love hearing from residents. I love speaking to residents. Town halls are a lot of fun, and I also like to be collaborative rather than punitive. So when people have problems, you know, as residents, instead of cracking down really hard, I always try to find some area where we can come together and figure out a solution that works for everybody. And that's my philosophy in general in life, but also as being a commissioner. Like, I want to collaborate and come together to find a solution that makes the most sense. And then finally, and for me most importantly right now, I am working on the mental health initiatives that I mentioned earlier. I think these are very important. It's going to bring more resources into our community. We're partnering with Proviso Township Mental Health Commission, which is going to give us open the door for a lot of other opportunities, and putting this public health board back in place is going to be a meaningful way to make sure that, you know, gaps that people have in health issues are met to whatever extent we can meet them on a local level. I want to continue working on that, and I'm hoping to have your support on April 4th so I can continue this important work. Thank you.
So, let's thank our candidates. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Forest Park Review would like to again thank District 91 for welcoming us. Good night, everyone.